Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Our topic for today is positive rods, divided into spore forming and non-spore forming. The spore forming includes the Bacillus and Clostridium species, whereas the non-spore forming include Corynebacterium, diphtheria, and Listeria monocytogenes. Another differentiating features between this organism is that the spore forming ones are comparatively longer and more deeply staining, whereas non-spore forming organisms are club-shaped and comparatively smaller and comparatively lighter staining, but they characteristically appear V-shaped or L-shaped. Now, another differentiating feature between these organisms is that all are aerobic. That means they need oxygen to grow, except for Clostridium species, meaning that they can grow in even dead tissues. Now, the last differentiating features between all of these organisms combined together is that all of these produce exotoxins, like Bacillus will produce it, Corynebacterium, Clostridium, except for Listeria monocytogen, which does not produce any exotoxin. It consists upon 4 species: Clostridium tetani, which causes tetanus; Clostridium botulinum, which causes flaccid paralysis; Clostridium perfringens, which causes gas gangrene; and Clostridium difficile, which causes gastrointestinal upset when you take a lot of antibiotics. As you know, this is an anaerobe, meaning that it does not require any oxygen for its growth, and along that it is spore forming. Clostridium botulinum causes botulism. Now, botulism is a flaccid paralysis. Now, how it causes will go towards its transmission and pathogenesis. Okay, now how this organism gets into body? Now, this is a spore-forming bacteria. These spores are commonly present in the soil as well as the vegetables and the meat. Now, this organism grows in and is an anaerobic organism, so it will grow in or produce spores in an oxygen deficient area. So all of these things from the soil, this organism is with the soil and the vegetables and the meat, all of these food are stored in a vacuum packed can. Now, if adequate sterilization is not given to that can, those spores that the organism form starts to germinate. Now, next what happens is when they have an alkaline environment and they germinate, whenever they are consumed without without proper frying, or you can say because this toxin is heat labile, so if inactive boiling for several minutes or cooking is insufficient, this will enter into the gastrointestinal system, where the organism will actually secrete a lot of toxins that will enter the circulatory system. From the circulatory system, it will affect the peripheral nerve synapses. From the peripheral circulation, this toxin enters the presynaptic space. Now, in the presynaptic space, it acts preaxonally on that protein which actually activates or which actually tells the acetylcholine containing receptors to be released into the presynaptic space in order to cause a specific sort of nerve movement or nerve response, which can be either flexion or contraction, etc. So if this protein is being cleaved, so there will be no release of acetylcholine in the respective synapse. Hence, the next axon will not be stimulated. Similarly, there will be no contraction. If there is no contraction of any muscle, what will it lead to? It will lead to flaccid paralysis. Botulinum toxin secreted by Clostridium botulinum is a polypeptide that is encoded by a lysogenic phage. This depicting its polypeptide structure. Now, immunogenically, it has 8 serotypes, but the most important one that actually cause disease include A, B, and E. These are also commercially important because a immunological type of toxin is used in the preparation of forming Botox, which is used in a lot of spasmodic muscle disorders such as torticollis, writer's cramp, and blepharospasm. The clinical features of this disease is that it causes descending sort of paralysis, meaning it starts from the head, then goes to the bottom. So we'll start off with the eyes. Now in the eyes, what it causes is that it causes diplopia, meaning a patient has double vision. Even though one person is present, that person will see that thing as two people are standing over there. The next thing is that it can also leads to dysphagia, which is difficulty in swallowing, consumption of food. And the last stage is that it can affect the respiratory muscles, that are the extensors, which will result in respiratory paralysis. Unlike its counterpart, Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is an ascending disease, meaning that it would affect the peripheries first, then slowly ascend up and cause respiratory paralysis. And so the both end product of both of these diseases is quite dangerous. Another feature of this disease is that it can also be acquired from a wound infection. So if a person has been cut somewhere and the spores have entered through that respective wound site and they have germinated, so it can also lead to such a similar paralysis. It can also occur in infant babies. Now, in babies, what happens is that in some cultural societies, they like to give small babies some sort of sweet in as a cultural ritual thing. So that sweet is actually it can have those spores. So whenever it is being consumed by such babies, such a thing is consumed like ingestion of honey. This can also lead to transmission of botulism, which can be, again, it can enter through the body, and by the gut it is absorbed, and from there it enters the blood, and similarly the presynaptic space, and similarly affects the whole of the body. So the mode of action is somewhat similar, but the point of entry can be different. The modern diagnosis of this disease is basically clinical presentation, because this organism cannot be cultured on any type of gram stain, or we cannot find it so quickly. But its antitoxin or its toxin can be acquired from the human body and can be inoculated into mice, where we basically technically watch the disease progress and watch those mice to eventually die if they die. So similarly, we know that this toxin is present in the actual human blood, and if we inoculate them with antitoxin, and they get better. So similarly, we know that this is the actual disease that is going on in the patient. So it's quite cruel, though. Protection against this disease, or this, in order to treat the patient having such symptoms, can be we can give the patient trivalent antitoxin. Now, trivalent antitoxin, why? Because we know that serotypes A, B, and only E can cause the most commonest of these diseases. So we need to prevent, we have to give an antitoxin against these immunological types. Similarly, we also have to give the patient some respiratory support. Another thing, how can you know that the patient is going under, or slowly there is respiratory paralysis? One of the key featuring during monitoring is that we need to see the patient is having paradoxical breathing movements. So if in a woman, we can see that normally the chest is supposed to be filled first, then there is mostly chest movement in prevalent in the female, and whereas there is abdominal movement of breathing that is prevalent in male. So if it is in the opposite direction, or it is counterclockwise, that female is using the abdominal muscles in order to respirate, so that is considered as a paradoxical movement. That means that the patient is not able to maintain proper oxygen gradient, and patient is going into respiratory paralysis. Prevent such a disease from occurring is quite simple. You need a proper sterilization of all canned food, and whenever you approach such a meal, you always have to do appropriate amount of cooking, or cooking is best in order to kill those spores or germs that are present within it.